Distinguished President of the Republic of Finland, Stubb, Mrs. Susanne Inestu, Minister Strand, dear colleagues, students, esteemed guests. On behalf of University of Vaasa, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this special event where we celebrate President Stubb's Honorary Doctorate, and we'll get to hear his important lecture of the transformation of the world politics. The topic of President's lecture is highly relevant and important. We are living in the changing world, where growing geopolitical tensions, an evolving security landscape, and increasing uncertainties are posing significant challenges to both economy and societies. Climate change being one of the most serious problems and tensions challenging all economies and causing also instabilities in societies, if not yet today, but seriously in the future, if we don't make everything to stop it. At University of Vaasa, we believe that universities can and must play a significant role in this transformation. Our responsibility is to understand and shed light on this change, and through the highest quality research and teaching, provide insights and tools that enhance the resilience of businesses, public authorities, and citizens forming more sustainable societies. Here at the University of Vaasa, we are focusing on sustainable business, energy, and especially energy transition towards carbon neutrality and sustainable society. And this way, we are responding to global challenges. We seriously believe that when combining these three, we can make the change. Energy transition and sustainable society is our way to show the way to the society, businesses all around. We recently even established a new multidisciplinary research platform, preparedness, resilience platform, combining multidisciplinary research, showing the importance of research and teaching in these fields. These fields are strengthening global research, economic and societal resilience, as well as comprehensive security and preparedness. When combining economics, growth and preparedness in the society, we make an impact understanding these difficulties. In the University of Vaasa, we have long-standing expertise in business, technology and society in these fields. Economic resilience has become a central issue in world shaped by political shocks, global trade trends, whether it is tariffs and supply chains interruptions and inflationary pressures, business and economics and societies must adapt quickly and sustainable way, and all the time more faster than ever. So we also see universities as an essential fostering national resilience and the resilience of the students and citizens. This is where we are basing on our security. In the world where misinformation and disinformation can easily undermine the trust in science-based knowledge, in the decision making, it is more important than ever to base the choices on science and clear understanding the complex realities. We see this every day. In this light, the protection of academic freedom has become more crucial. Unfortunately, we are witnessing threats to the university autonomies and even the freedom of speech in different parts of the world. The parts of the world that we ever previously could not even imagine. This highlights the fact that researchers and academic institutions also need resilience to uphold the values of open inquiry, independent thinking, and pursuing the truth. Truth based on the best knowledge what we can offer based on science. So this is what we here in the University of Vaasa stand for the science, knowledge, and for the future. Esteemed President of Republic of Finland, Alexander Stubb, was awarded a Honorary Doctorate by the University of Vaasa at most recent conferment ceremony in September. And today he receives his honor in person. Alexander Stubb has made remarkable contribution into Finnish and international politics, public service, and academia. He is even described as one of the most educated presidents in Europe. Holding a PhD in international politics from the London School of Economics. His political career includes many positions. Positions as a member of Finnish Parliament and the European Parliament, party leader, several ministerial roles, including Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of European Affairs and Foreign Trade, Minister of Finance, and Prime Minister. After his time in government, he was appointed Vice President of the European Investment Bank, and before the nomination for the President of the Republic of Finland, Alexander Stubb served also academia as professor at the European University Institute in Florence. At the University of Vaasa, we regard President of Republic of Finland, Alexander Stubb, as an outstanding international leader who throughout his career has drawn attention to the importance of knowledge and science in the decision making. We are very proud to present him a doctorate hat, sword, and diploma, the symbols of the Honorary Doctorate. The hat symbolizes the academic freedom, the right and responsibility of scholars to seek truth without restrictions. This is what we see that honorably our President is doing. The sword represents the duty of defend the values of truth and knowledge, and to stand up for the integrity in research and leadership. This is what we see also. For the international and, of course, national community, these values are hugely important in current date of situations. So, on behalf of University of Vaasa, I extend my warm congratulations and deep gratitude to our new Honorary Doctor of Philosophy, President of Republic of Finland, Alexander Stubb.
Madam Rector, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the honor of getting an honorary doctorate. I do appreciate it dearly. I sometimes wonder myself, do I really deserve it or not? But your words sounded so nice, so it's very kind to take it. I have to begin probably with two remarks, and that is to say that sometimes being President of the Republic of Finland takes you to interesting places and interesting moments. And it seems to me that this past week will be for me a royal flush of these. Because I started in the Vatican on Saturday. I moved from there to the Veterans Day. And of course I started the morning here in Vöyri, in Vörå. I came to Vaasa, and I'm really looking forward to Vappu. It's lovely to be here, but it does feel a little bit surreal to a certain extent that first you are in Vörå, and you're in a school with 1,000 kids and students listening to Kai, Bara Bara Bastu and other things, and then the next thing you do is you come and listen to Mozart. So you get a good variety. My second observation that I wanted to make before I start my lecture, I always take great pleasure in visiting universities and having the opportunity and honor to address students, professors and academics. And I think the words, Minna, that you put forward here about the quest for truth are extremely important. I'm a firm believer in open society, obviously in liberal democracy, but the foundation of it all comes from academia and the quest for truth. And I don't think liberal democracy actually works unless you have a basic understanding of facts and an agreement about what kind of conversations you can have about science, political systems and economic systems. And to all of you students here, I encourage you to oscillate between different careers. My life expectancy is much shorter than yours. Your career stability is quite different from the one perhaps that I grew up with. But my grounding was in liberal arts, so trying to understand as broadly as possible what the world is about and looking for the true questions of life, about meaning, about societal organization, others. And I always found it quite useful to be for a time in the academic world to find my theoretical groundings, pretty much the thinking that you have at Vaasa University, but then also going over to a different type of a professional world. For me, it was civil service and later on politics. But I would encourage you, no matter what line of science you're studying, to go in between the two, to get the theoretical understanding and foundation, and then to do the practical research as well somewhere else. With these words, I've been asked today to speak about the emerging world order. And I'm doing a bit of a pan out in the sense that when I did my latest stint in academia, about 4 years ago, I started writing a book. And the book is called The Triangle of Power, Rebalancing the New World Order. And I started writing the book when President Trump finished his first term. And I finished writing the book when President Trump began his second term. The world has changed quite a lot in between. I've just handed over the manuscript a few weeks back, and I must say that it's quite a relief. But I'll try to follow a little bit the thinking that I have in that. And I'll do it by giving you an introduction, then 3 main points, and then a conclusion. The 3 main points are about the world order, number 1, the world balance, number 2, and the world dynamics, number 3. But by way of introduction, I started my studies in 1989 at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina, small liberal arts school down in the southern Bible Belt, if you will. And that was, of course, a time when the Berlin Wall fell. A couple of years later, the Soviet Union collapsed, and there was this sort of feeling that there was light at the end of a tunnel, and there was a big change in world politics. And my argument is that we are today living our generation's 1918, 1945, or 1989 moment when there is a bigger systemic change in international relations and in world politics. And though it might seem a little bit scary at times, quite turbulent, you have to understand that at these inflection points, there's always a way out. And my argument today will be to say that it'll take about 5 to 10 years for the new world order to settle. And I actually think that it will frame the world not only for decades to come, but probably all the way to the end of this century. Much like 1918 after World War I framed the time to World War II, framed the time to the Cold War, and then the post-Cold War era. And my argument today is also to say that I think the leaders around 1918 with the League of Nations had a good idea, but they didn't get it right. The leaders after World War II in 1945, which created the current order that we have, the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, they got it more or less right. And in 1989, when I was a student, I think the leaders had this thought that we were witnessing the end of history, the idea that all nation states in the world would gravitate towards some kind of a combination of liberal democracy, market economy, and globalization. But of course, I would argue, as of February 24, 2022, we realized this was not true. There's no such thing as a natural state of a liberal world order. There's no such thing as a natural state of liberal democracy. There's no such thing as a natural state of a social market economy or globalization. So my message to you today is that you all have agency. You have to stay calm in these kinds of situations. You have to try to analyze it rationally, but you have to understand that the world is not being created in some kind of a vacuum or bubble, let alone in some kind of a conspiracy theory. Each one of us has agency to change the world, and that's what I would like for you to take back from this talk today. Now, the first of my 3 points is about order. And of course, the funny thing with us human beings is that we have a tendency to over-rationalize the past. That's what kind of historians do, I guess. We have to over-dramatize the present. I guess that's what us political scientists quite often do. And when we do these two mistakes, we kind of underestimate the future. And my starting point is to say that before World War I, we were witnessing a rather multipolar world. Yes, there was, a broader concert of powers, big states ruling over small, but there was also this very strong feeling before 1914 of internationalism, of multiculturalism, of art, of culture. This basic thought that we're going towards something good until the shots of Sarajevo hit on World War I. And after World War I, we continued this multipolar world. There was an attempt to make it multilateral, which means that you create institutions such as the League of Nations and have norms. But interestingly enough, there was one country that did not eventually, end of the day, participate in the League of Nations, and that was the United States. It sort of left the multilateral order for a while until it came back to World War II after Pearl Harbor. Now, we went from a multipolar world pretty much to a post-World War II era, which we call the Cold War, which was bipolar. You had two superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States, dominating, and they had a set of allies, some forced, others voluntary. And the battle was systemic in the sense that there was a real competition between capitalism and communism, between democracy and perhaps more authoritarian regimes. And eventually, for one reason or another, the American model won. But the big mistake we did in 1989 when we went from a bipolar world and a bipolar order to a unipolar moment in history where the United States was the undisputed superpower of the world was that we didn't believe that we needed to strengthen the rules. We didn't believe that we needed to strengthen the institutions that had been created after World War II. We just thought that everyone would fall into place and abide by the current system. Now, of course, the change of the order could be pinned down to 9/11, the war in Iraq, the war in Georgia, the fall of Lehman Brothers, the fall of the financial system and capitalism in the financial crisis in the West, or to the rise of populism in liberal democracies, both left and right, or to Brexit. But I still think that the real moment when we saw that the old system doesn't exist anymore was the violent attack and war of aggression that Russia forged against Ukraine, starting on the 24th of February 2022. And the reason I say this is that that was not supposed to be possible, because the international order's new rules and norms had a certain notion of sovereignty, of territorial integrity, of not attacking another one. And that was violated, and this sort of set the ball in motion. And that's the world that we are living in right now. And for me, the battle is between a multipolar world, which has less rules, and a multilateral world, which has more rules. And in simple city terms, I could say that this is very much the Yalta or the Helsinki moment for our generation. Yalta, 80 years ago, the three great powers after World War II come together and basically carve out what the world should look like. They were, of course, the United Kingdom, the United States, and the Soviet Union. They were also the ones who ended up being in the UN Security Council, together, of course, with France and with China. Helsinki, again, 50 years ago, pretty much in a couple of months to the day, was an idea that you could actually bring the East and West together, and you would have a certain set of rules and norms in three different baskets that would define the rules of states. And the key three elements, in my mind, still are independence, sovereignty, so sovereignty to decide, and then of course territorial integrity. Those were the rules that were set up. And I think this is the battle or competition that we are seeing right now about the New World Order. My second point is about the balance. And this is probably the thesis of the book as well. And that is to say that I think that there are three spheres of power in the world right now, very broadly defined. We have the global West, which is or was, we don't know yet, led by the United States. That's roughly 50 countries. They are countries that founded through Bretton Woods or San Francisco the current institutions and norms that we had. They set the tone with the leadership of the United States. Basically, the international order that we have today is an American order. It's a Western order. On the other side, you have the global East, roughly 25 states led by China, followed by the likes of Russia and 23 countries that usually vote with them in the UN. They want to change the current order. And in the middle of this, of course, is a big power struggle between the United States on one hand and China on the other. But the belief of the global East is that, well, the current system that we have doesn't play well enough into the hands of other powers in the East. So to a certain extent, an understandable argument, but with a twist. My big thesis is that the one who's going to decide the next world order is actually the global South. And I hate to lump 125 countries together, but they are countries who did not have, in my mind, sufficient access to the international system throughout their history. Could have been through colonialization, could have been through something else. The global South will have a few key swing states or powers that will determine whether we tilt towards the multipolarity, probably driven by the global East, or the multilateralism driven by the global West. These countries include India, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico. And my point is that in this new world order, if we in the West want to have an impact, we basically have to move towards not only a dignified foreign policy, but dialogue and cooperation with the global South in a completely different way in which we have done in the past roughly 100 years. So right now we're living in this sort of mix in the balance, where the balance hasn't settled. After World War II, it settled towards the West. After the Cold War, it was very much around the United States. And now in this multipolar world, we don't know exactly the direction in which it's going to go. My third and final point is about the dynamics of power. And in my world, again simplified, you have one dynamic which is competition, which can be quite good. It can be economic competition, it can be political competition, it can be technological competition. That's what drives us forward. But the problem, of course, becomes if competition is misused. We're seeing, for instance, right now, a competition of tariffs and customs, which are basically breaking the old economic order. And I'm not sure this is going to end up well, but we don't know. The worst thing that can happen is that the global competition, geopolitical competition, leads to conflict. And after the Cold War, it was pretty simple. Most conflicts, as horrible as they are, were local. They were basically civil wars. Now we're starting to see regional conflicts. Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine, and spillover effects elsewhere. So the bottom line is, if a vacuum of power emerges, someone is going to fill it. And if there are no rules of the competition, you're going to have more conflict. And of course, what we need to avoid is not only the conflict going from local to regional, but then becoming global. And that's what a lot of people are trying to manage right now. And the final element of dynamics, which I'm sort of hoping for, is cooperation. But in order for there to be competition which does not spill over to conflict, cooperation has to be based on new rules. We cannot be in a world where the most important national organization in the world, the United Nations, has a Security Council which has only 5 members, and only those 5 members have a veto power. It is completely unacceptable that there are no members in the UN Security Council from Latin America, that there are no members from Africa, and that there's only 1 member from Asia. So if we want to have a rules-based world order, there needs to be agency. And agency comes from a feeling that you have a say in a system. And the paradox of our time right now is that exactly at a point when we need cooperation on climate change, on technology, because artificial intelligence is going to change who we are as human beings and our cognitive capacity as well. When we need cooperation on energy, when we need cooperation on development, when we need cooperation on migration, that is exactly the moment when we're trying to tear the institutions where this could be done apart. And we need to, in my mind, work against that. So I'll conclude before Q&A by saying that we don't exactly know where the world is going to go yet. One possibility is that we go towards some kind of an a la carte world where it's kind of dog eat dog, you know, very Hobbesian in many ways. You just do transactional deals with whoever. You have no values, you only have interests. Very Machiavellian thinking, if you will. That world is possible. The second one is that we move towards more regional integration, where I have to admit Europe would not be badly off because we've had this laboratory since World War II. But then that would mean that most value chains and most cooperation comes home to roost, and you do that cooperation regionally, be it in the African Union, the European Union, in ASEAN or in Mercosur or whatever you want to call it. So you sort of come closer to home. And then the third option, which I'm of course hoping for, is that we find some kind of a global deal or new global rules and norms within the existing institutions. But I do think this is going to be a long walk. It'll take about, as I said, 5 to 10 years. And I think we will be faced with a new world disorder for those 5 to 10 years. And that's really when you have to, you know, keep your head quite cool. You have to analyze and see how you can best drive it. It's always easy to say that we live in interesting times, but for someone who is always has been interested in international relations and big changes, I must say that the challenges are few and far in between, and I see them personally every day and every week and every month. But my final 2 points is that, number one, you all have agency in this world. You cannot outsource yourself and just basically be spectators. And number two, don't worry about it. We'll manage. The world is always going to be a better place, better than yesterday, and not as good as tomorrow. Thank you very much. Let's go.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this great lecture. We have some questions that our students would want to ask you, and actually I'll ask you the first one. So, what do you see that is the role of students, or role or potential of students in this transforming world?
Well, I mean, There are many ways and many angles to look at it from. I think the rector brought out the key one. First is this sort of this innate belief and trust in truth and the method of science. I actually think the reason liberal democracies are at the end of the day always going to be stronger than autocracies is that liberal democracies have a corrective mechanism. And I think the method of science is always about a corrective mechanism. So you basically admit failure, and then you try to come to the next point, to understand, to get to the truth. We live in a world right now where there is this illusion that information makes us somehow wiser. It doesn't, because information needs to be categorized. You and I, if I may, we are information managers. We sit in front of screens day in and day out. We look at numbers, we look at letters, we put them together, and then we communicate them in one way or another to try to understand. But the method of science is basically to try to come to that truth. And that's a hell of a lot more difficult than just sort of flowing the information. So I just ask for all students to be engaged. And my final point is very, I guess, Aristotelian or Platonic or Socratian, I guess, is to say that, know that you don't know. And start with that assumption every day, that you have to have a sort of an open and a curious mind that searches for that truth every day. I think that's a good start.
Thank you very much. The next question we have from Vaasa University student Heidi Ellis.
Thank you, first of all, Mr. President, for your brilliant words. My question for you is, what can we do to preserve the strength of democracy in Finland and in Europe? Well,
point number one is challenge authority and challenge power. Challenge the President of the Republic. So I think the starting point is that if you live in an uncritical society, it's usually a society that doesn't develop. So in order for you to preserve democracy, there are many different elements. You work towards an open society, you promote freedom of speech, you promote media freedom, you're engaged in elections, not only voting, perhaps you want to take a political stand for something that you believe in strongly, which means that you might want to, take the big courageous step of running for a public office. These are elements that I think preserve democracy. And for me, it all starts from this sort of, holy triangle of a separation of powers between the judicial, legislative, and executive power. But I think what all of us need to understand, all of us in the room, I make an assumption that we kind of like liberal democracy. You have to understand that it's not an end state. It's not some kind of a finalité that, great, Finland is a democracy, second or first country, depending on how you count, to give women the right to vote. We have a vibrant democratic culture. Well, that can all fall, as we have seen in some liberal democracies. So it's very important, I think, for all students to keep working at the notion of liberal democracy every day. And for me, that means that you stay engaged and stick to the rule of law.
Thank you for that. Well, still one more student question from Vaasa University student Katarina Roivainen. So, Katarina, you're welcome.
Thank you for your interesting lecture. My question for you is that what would you like to say to the students who are worried about the current state of the world and their own future?
Yeah. One of my predecessors, Mauno Koivisto, used to have a saying, I don't know how well it translates into English, but it was something to the effect that if you don't know what's going to happen in the future, assume that good things will happen. Now, you might say that that's an innately optimistic view, but if, of course, we look at the broad spectrum of history, and you don't only have to be a student of Yuval Harari to see that the biggest killers of mankind throughout history have been disease, famine, and wars. And even though it doesn't feel like that right now, the numbers are much lower than they have ever been in the history of mankind. The problem is that we live in a world of noise. You and I, we're on our screens a lot of times. Probably I'm too much. At least that's what my wife says. We get war in real time. And I remember studying in the US, and that was around the first Gulf War. And that was a time when for the first time you saw news anchors like Tom Brokaw standing, at hotel tops somewhere in Kuwait, seeing missiles flying around. And that was shocking to me as a student, and of course felt quite anxious about it. Now take that a few hundred times to what you see on your screens today. So there is this sort of understanding of anxiety. But at the end of the day, if you fall into that trap of anxiety and think that you cannot influence, that you cannot help, then you've lost the game. So the hope that I have is that you are active in trying to make this world into a better place. And again, this period of disorder will last for a few years. But at the same time, when a new order emerges, there are new opportunities. And there will be a time when we look back at the post-2022 world and think, oh, what was all the big noise about? But right now we're so engaged in it. Final point, the human mind is quite categorical. And I feel personally that, yes, for me as president of Finland, our big war is Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. But, the suffering in Gaza or the West Bank is no less. And especially the suffering in Sudan, which is almost a war that we have completely forgotten. So try to be engaged in as many things as possible and believe that the future is always going to be better for so many reasons, not least because of the fact that technology always provides for good advancement of mankind.
Thank you for that great answer. Now we have time for a question or two from the public, please. We have their question up there.
Hello, thank you. My name is Riju, and I'm a finance student here at University of Vaasa, and I originally come from China. So I'd like to ask your perspective or to shed a light on the current situation where the global trade tension intensifies, and particularly the escalating tariff dispute between US and China. What's your perspective how Finland, as a proponent of free trade, can tackle or de-escalating this trade dispute?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The first one is I'll use a notion of traditional Finnish humility. Finland is still quite a small player. Having said that, we are members of the European Union. Of course, the European Union is the biggest trading bloc in the world, and it has exclusive competence on things such as trade, customs, competition, and monetary policy. Now, what can I do as president of Finland, or what can we do as Finns? We can engage in a conversation with President Trump, which I have, about tariffs. We've had discussions about, what the impacts are and what could be done. My take is very simple. It would be useful to base world trade on the current rules and norms rather than unilateral transactions in terms of customs and tariffs. So I have suggested from a rather selfish perspective that we should move to a zero tariff policy on manufacturing goods with the United States and move towards a fair and free trade agreement with the United States. Having said all of that, China, of course, is a huge economic force. There's no question about that. So if the United States and China, as they are right now, engaged in tariff wars, that will have ramifications for global trade. So de-escalate is my first message, and after that, start building common rules and norms. That's why we have the WTO.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. President. Our rector will give the final closing words.
Actually, my wordings here is only to thank you. Thank you, our deepest gratitude, President of Republic Alexander Stubb, for visiting us, visiting our university, Vaasa, Vöyri, Ostrobotnia, and then continuing to visit one of our jewelry stone companies in Finland, Wärtsilä. We really thank you for also accepting the Honorary Doctorate position in our university. And we hope that this gives you strength for your very important work for Finland and for Europe, and to try to keep the global balance. I think we all share this deep gratitude and will want to wish you a luck and all the strength for your hugely important work. Thank you.